Hey friends, it's Simon Hurley from Simon Hurley Create with Ranger Ink, and I'm here at Scrapbook.com to talk all about my background stamps. What's really special about our background stamps is the peel apart sections in them. Most of them have little areas that can peel out, and you can use them separately as focal points, and they're super versatile. So today I'm going to walk you guys through a couple techniques using the peel apart background stamps. So starting off with one of my favorites, this stamp is called Pinstripe. What's really awesome about this stamp is it's got 3 different types of stripes throughout the background that kind of repeat down the line, but all of them peel apart. So you got a bunch of different sections here that come apart. Now when you first get your peel apart background stamps, they are kind of linked by little pieces of rubber like this, and you just have to peel them apart. Nothing is breaking, you're totally fine by peeling that apart, and then your stamp is ready to use. So I've got 3 different stripes up here that I want to use. And of course, you could stamp this down as a full background, but one of my favorite things to do is segment the background and stamp it down in different colors for each pattern. This is something that you really aren't able to achieve with just a normal background stamp, so it's super cool that you're able to bring out the different pieces of the background and create different colored patterns. Now I'm going to bring in the large Simon Hurley Create acrylic block. You're going to notice that these work really well for the background stamps because it's sized perfectly to fit the length of the background stamp. So when you peel apart different sections, you can then add it down onto your acrylic block and use it just like this for your stamping techniques. Now with this technique, I need kind of a sticky surface, and this one also has grid lines, which are really going to help us line up our stamping. So I'll peel off the protective sheet. I'm using Scrapbook.com's Clearly Amazing mat, and this has a nice stick to it. So I'm going to place down my piece of cardstock. I'll line it up in the center and then place this right down onto my mat. And the awesome part about this is it sticks down nicely and I don't have to tape it down, but also when I'm ready to remove it, it's not going to rip my cardstock. All right, now I'm going in with the stripe that we chose, and I'm going to use a couple different colors of my Simon Hurley Create inks. Here I'm starting off with a really light color called Over the Moon. I love this nice kind of warm yellow tone. And then I'm going to stamp it down. Now for this, I'm going to create kind of a crisscross plaid like you saw in the card example. So what I'm going to do is line this up with 2 of the lines. So here I'm starting off with this line, and then I'll bring it diagonally down to this line on the mat. I'm going to line the edge of my stamp up with that section, and then stamp it down. When we lift it off, you'll see we have a nice stripe going diagonally across the card. Now I'm going to ink this up a second time, and this time I'm going to go in the opposite direction. So I'm going to line it up with this line and this line, crisscrossing it, and like I said, these lines on the mat are incredibly helpful to line it up and make sure your pattern is going to be nice and even as you're stamping down the card. And the awesome part is that right in the center where it overlaps, you get this super cool kind of plaid look. And we're going to keep repeating this pattern all the way down our card until it's nice and completed with lots of color. I'll just wipe off my stamp to clean it, and then I'm going to bring in another stripe. Like I said, there's 3 different types of stripes in this background stamp, so you've got a couple different options as you create your patterns. Next, I'm moving in with a little bit brighter of a yellow called Shooting Star. I'm going to ink this up. And then, to stamp this down, I'm just going to line up the edge of my stamp with the edge of the last design that we stamped, and then give it some good pressure to transfer it onto the surface. And I'll repeat this step on the opposite side to continue building the pattern on the card. Lastly, I'll swap out to the 3rd stripe. And one more tip when you're adhering these down, instead of picking up the stripe and adding it down onto your card, which can kind of leave it a little bit crooked, I like to let it kind of rest on my craft sheet to make sure it's nice and straight, and then we'll take our acrylic block and add it down on top. This will ensure that your lines are super straight as you're stamping them. Next, I'll bring in a little bit of Roar, which is this really beautiful and vibrant orange color. I'll ink that up, and then we can line it up with the edge of our last stamping and stamp it down onto our card. And we'll repeat this same step on the opposite side. I finished up the rest of the stamping of the background, and check that out. I love how it kind of overlaps in the center there and creates such a beautiful plaid pattern. And of course you could continue it down the whole card, but I like that it kind of stops here so you can add a sentiment or a focal point right in the center there. So to remove it from this sticky mat, I'm just going to kind of bend it like this, and it's going to peel off really nice and easily. Like I said, it won't rip your cardstock at all. And then if you've got ink down on the surface like this, you can always spray it down with a little bit of water, especially using the Simon Hurley Create inks. They're really great because they wipe off super easily and you don't have to rub too hard. You want to really gently kind of lightly wipe off the ink there. It's going to come off super easily. So you can see once this has dried, it becomes completely sticky and ready to use over and over again. And I like to put the acetate that comes with it right back onto the sheet for storage so that no dust gets on it and it doesn't get dirty at all. I love how this plaid background turned out, and here I just cut off the edges, add a little bit of a cardstock border, and then I finished it off with a sentiment. I love this sentiment set called Sentimental Florals. It's got some really beautiful floral images in it that are nice and large for focal points, but then also a ton of great basic sentiments. Next, I'm going to pull in the watercolor bloom stamp. I love this one because it's got all of these amazing florals here that you can create a beautiful background out of. But like the others, you can see that there's lots of amazing peel apart sections in this stamp that you can use separately to create your own colored bouquet and arrangement of florals. I love how that one looks. And also when it comes to this stamp, you can see that there are lots of little details that are a little bit lighter on this stamp. And that's going to transfer like that in person. It gives you almost a watercolor effect from just the stamp because it's a bunch of little dots that make up those images. Here I'm peeling out the larger and smaller flower to stamp down, and I'll also peel out one of the little leaves that we can use to kind of add on the side of our flowers. I'll pick these up with our acrylic blocks, and then we can get to stamping. Alright, so I love it when it comes to these flowers because they're not attached to any of the other images. So it's really easy to apply ink to certain areas that you want covered, but not others, and you don't have to do any sort of masking with it, which is really nice. I went in with a little bit of Psych for some of the leaves, and then I'll go in with a little bit of Viper to kind of darken up some of the areas as well. Then for the flower, I'm going to use a little bit of Triple Berry. And if you want to, you can kind of use the edge of your ink pads to get into more detailed areas. Just going to use this to stamp down the first layer of purple. And then to add a little bit of darker color here, I'm going to do a little bit of Crown Me kind of coming in from the edge there to create a little bit of blending and shading. Now we can also bring in our blending tools like we did in some of the other lessons to kind of shade in this and help them blend together a little bit, get rid of any harsh marks. Then all we need to do is line it up on our card and stamp it down. Let some of that ink transfer there, and there we have a beautiful impression. And like I said, just by stamping this, because this is made up of a bunch of little dots, you can see that this flower is kind of separate. You've got these top little areas that are a little bit lighter, and it makes it look like this cool watercolor effect, even though we used no water. I'll do the same thing for this one, using a little bit of Psych to go in for the leaves. And then here I'm going to change it up a little bit. I like to kind of bring in some different types of greens for the different types of greenery. So here I'm using a little bit of Later Gator, which is a totally different color. This one's more olivey, and this one's got kind of a warmer green tone to it. Lots of different options. And then I'm going to go in with a little bit of Guppy for the floral. Ink that up. And then add a little bit of shading using a little bit of Roar from one edge. Once that's complete, we can go in and stamp this down. And check out those bright and vibrant colors we got going on there. Now lastly, I'll go in with this little leaf, and I'm going to ink it up with just a little bit of Psych, and again, a little bit of Viper. And then we can stamp this down, kind of coming out from some of those flowers there. I like just a little bit of extra dimension that this adds, and it kind of builds the bouquet a little bit more than just having those two flowers by themselves. I'll stamp one more leaf coming right out of there. Perfect. To finish this one off, I'm using the Sentimental Floral stamp set again, and I'm going to use the sentiment that says, I love you. Just adhering this down onto my acrylic block, and then I'll go in. I like to use Shady for some of these sentiments. The reason why is because it's almost black, but it's not quite there, so it creates this really great dark effect, but it kind of still lets the other colors on the card shine without taking over too much like a black ink would. So I'm just going to ink this up. And then we can stamp it down, kind of overlapping some of those flowers a little bit. Give it some good pressure and let that ink transfer. Then when we lift it off, we have a nice focal point image, and that finishes off the card really beautifully. I love that sentiment, and stamping it in this a little bit lighter than black color. Lastly, I'm going to go in with the funky Argyle background stamp. I love this one. It's kind of a playful and whimsical design, and it's got this stripe of the Argyle that peels out, so you can use this separately and create a really beautiful pattern using it. So I'm going to once again use my Simon Hurley Create large acrylic block and adhere this down to there. And then we can go in with our background stamp and just do a little bit of quick and easy stamping. So I'll just ink this up, and then similar to how we did the stripe stamp, you can use this one strip all the way down the card and create a really great multicolored pattern with it. So just stamping that down. And then in between colors, I'm just going to use a little bit of a wet cloth or paper towel to kind of wipe off in between the next color. And my inks don't stain, so it's really easy to clean off before we move on to the next stamping. So then I'm going in with a little bit of Clear Skies. I'll ink this up. And again, with these sort of patterns, I like to take this. It would have stamped like this, but you can kind of offset it a little bit and then line it up with the edge of the rubber and stamp it down. Check that out. I love how it's looking. Then we can stay with that same color, ink it up, and stamp it down right above. And again, take this, move it off a little bit, and stamp it down. And then lastly, I'll go in with Psych one more time and offset it, and then stamp it right down. And same thing one more time up top. One last thing I like to do to really bring these to life and draw your eye to the center of the card, wherever the focal point will be, is I go in with my domed blending foam and the same color of ink that I stamped with. So here I'm using a little bit of Psych and Clear Skies, and I'm just going to go around the edge and ink blend the edge using the same color that was stamped there. So here I stamped with Psych, I'll ink blend the edge there. This one is using a little bit of Psych, so I'll ink blend it there. And I'm skipping over the sections where I use Clear Skies for now. Then I'll bring in a sponge with a little bit of Clear Skies on it, and we'll fill in the areas that we stamped using the Clear Skies color. So just kind of blending these together, and you can kind of blend it into the other one so it creates another color. The reason why I like to do this is because it really darkens up the edge, which draws your eye to the center. And like I said, you're going to usually put a focal point in the center of your card, so it's a really great way to kind of bring it to life. And also, it makes it a little bit less stark white and brings a little bit more color into the background. I love how that finished blending and stamped background looks. Alright, I hope you guys really enjoyed these stamping techniques using the peel apart background stamps. There's so much you can do with it, and I cannot wait to see all of your amazing projects in the gallery.